Good morning, everyone. I would start today's event with a beautiful divine hymn about righteousness. It reads, where there is righteousness in the heart, there is beauty in the character. And when there is the beauty in the character, there is harmony in the home. And when there is harmony in the home, there is order in the nation. And when there is order in the nation, there is peace in the world. This hymn says all about the beautiful connectivity between the heart, character, society, nation, and the world. And this connectivity in India flows from our constitution and its principles, whether social, economic, or political, helps us in channelizing and formulating our policies and actions for achieving righteousness and equality among the citizens. With these words, I welcome you all to this national webinar organized to celebrate National Constitution Day with the theme reiterating the values and the principles enshrined in the Indian Constitution. I welcome Shri Rubinderjit Singh Bararji, Director Higher Education, Chandigarh. Thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time for being with us today. I also welcome Professor Nisha Agarwal, Principal GCG 42 Chandigarh. Professor Nisha Agarwalji, former principal of Government College of Commerce and Business Administration, Chandigarh, needs no introduction. She has an excellent experience of about 35 years and has an ability to train teachers to do their best. With excellent communication and interpersonal skills, ma'am is an expert in preparing college curriculum and managing the student relations. Professor Agarwal co-authored a number of books on the subject of financial markets and institutions, financial services, etc. She has published many research papers in the refereed journals and presented papers in various national and international conferences. Now, without taking much of your time, I request Principal Ma'am to formally welcome our speaker, Professor Pampa Mukherjee, and the other participants. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all to the national webinar on reiterating the values and principles enshrined in the Indian Constitution, an endeavor by PGGCG 42 to reinforce the significance and importance of Constitution of India. The Government of India declared the 26th November as Constitution Day on 19th November 2015 by Gazette notification in remembrance of the father of Indian Constitution, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. The Constitution Day was formerly known as National Law Day. It is also known as Samvidhan Divas. This day is celebrated on 26 November every year in India to celebrate the historical moment of the adoption of the Indian Constitution. On 26 November 1949, the Constitution Assembly of India adopted the Constitution of India, and the day bears immense historical significance. To understand the significance of the day, it is essential to be aware of the Constitution Day history. On this day, attempts are made to generate general awareness on Indian Constitution and spread Dr. Ambedkar's nationalist ideas. Constitution Day is celebrated on 26 November every year by our college, where the students are made to read the preamble to Indian Constitution. As Indians, we must be aware of our Indian Constitution, and this day attempts to generate that awareness in us. This webinar has been designed in consonance with the similar spirit to educate one and all with the basic knowledge of the Constitution of India. On behalf of staff and faculty of PG GCG 42, I thank Shri Rubinderjit Singh Ji Barar, Director Higher Education, Chandigarh Administration, for his wholehearted support and guidance in the organization of this webinar. I welcome our speaker, Professor Pema Mukherjee, Department of Political Science, Punjab University, Chandigarh, to speak about the topic and enlighten our participants. I once again wholeheartedly welcome everyone attending this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I now request Professor Sudhir Hindwan, Department of Political Science, Government College for Girls, Sector 42, to formally introduce our speaker, Professor Pampa Mukherjee, to the all present. Over to you, sir.
Okay, good morning to everyone. It is truly an honor or a matter of privilege for PGGCG 42 to host a webinar on the Constitutional Day. The National Constitutional Day is also called Samvidhan Divas, as ma'am has already explained it to you. And the Constitution of India was adopted on 26 November 1949 and came into effect on 26 January in the year 1950. This day is celebrated to spread the awareness of the ideologies of Ambedkar, one of the pioneering leaders of equality as such. Before I take off in other important areas, I just want to say that why uh, we chose Professor Mukherjee as an important political scientist in Punjab University as the main speaker on this, because we would be dwelling with an idea of having some constitutional expert on this occasion. But I thought there has to be somebody who can take out this entire purview of the knowledge versus the power and take it out from that purview and bring it out forth so far as explanation of the developing society is concerned. So almost about 2 years of hard work, 2 years, 11 months, and about 17 days of hard work which has gone in. So in order to commemorate the hard work which has been chipped in by these people, the government of India has decided to consider this as an important day for a celebration of the Constitution. And those people who have virtually contributed so much, including the women, 15 women and all that, which contributed to this extent. My memory is, it takes me back sometime to the think of retrospect in the golden hinges of the days when I was at CPR, when we used to churn out ideas, having, one kind of stimulation and discussion regarding various issues. And the two important issues which came up before us, one was the National Unity Day, and another one was the National Constitutional Day. We that time, I think it was 1994, way back, while discussing with these issues, so one of the experts in this particular area, Mr. Subhash Kashyap, and the doyen in the field of ICS, Sri LP Singh, who's no more now. He said, Sudhir, one day you were virtually going to see that these 2 days are going to be celebrated because the kind of hard work the framers of the Constitution and put in. And you see those both have become reality, the National Unity Day as well as the National Constitution Day. Both have been celebrated now with a great fervor. So you see that some of the most uh, important ideas which have been generated and the most beautiful things what happens in the world, they cannot be touched, they cannot be seen, but they virtually felt. So the nations as well as national unity and even the constitution as such, you would see that they cannot be built with the mortars or bricks. They are built with the character of the people and the kind of a correct the people with a strong character we have had in our constitution. We must bow before them. So I, before moving on to just introduction of Professor Pampa Mukherjee, who doesn't need any introduction, I would certainly say that this webinar should not be considered just as a ritual, but we have to look into ourselves and see that what and all we can do for the Constitution. Normally, people and institutions, they've been saying that what the Constitution has done for us, whether the Constitution has really empowered us or not. But the matter of fact is that we got to also look into the process and critical analysis, critical evaluation of ourselves and say that how much we have contributed to the Constitution of India. And particularly these are defining moments when you are having this the tremendous amount of change which is taking place at the international arena as well as the national arena. Also you are having various threats which the country is encountering in this kind of a situation. Do you think that whether we will be talking about promulgation of important thing, Now, the most important thing which comes before us is that to churn out various ideas and let the new generation know that what and all we can contribute. And in this regard, our department, particularly the PGCG 42s and Department of Political Science as well as the Department of Public Administration, the both should do efforts. And we sorry, which was added later by 42nd Constitution Amendment 1976, and the 11th duty was also added by 86th Constitutional Amendment in 2002. We thought it would be better that if we not only talk about our rights, but we should also talk about the duties and how much we can contribute to the nations in this regard. Nevertheless, now I would like to introduce Professor Pompa Mukherjee. As I said, that she doesn't require any kind of introduction. She's a toil a doyen in the field of political science and ardent scholar. She has got more than 2 decades of experience in teaching and research, and she specializes in the area of comparative policy development, environmental, as well as the public policy in developing society. Presently, she is working as as a head of the institution out there. Was a honorary director of the Center for Study of Midwest and Central Asia, Punjab University. She and I had two common things in the sense that both were from Delhi University as well as from JNU. As a good friend and extremely good scholar, and passed out from one of the best institutions of India at the same time. You would see that she's published extensively in peer-reviewed journals as well as book chapters which have been published from UK, Routledge, and she has done tremendous contribution in the field of academia, being currently the editor-in-chief of Punjab University Journal, Research Journal for Social Sciences, and honorary director for the Center of Midwest and Central Asian Republic. She has passed out from LSR, um, Delhi University, and JNU. I don't think that anyone has done so much of work in the issues of Punjab and issues related to, you know, land issues related to Telangana and Punjab community migration with regard to South and Southeast Asia, which Professor Pampa Mukherjee has done. So it's a remarkable contribution she has made. I thought like she'll be the apt person for this particular occasion to enlighten you all. So here is Professor Mukherjee to just just enlighten all of us about the relevance of the fundamental duties on this particular day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Sudhir Hindwan, for such kind and benevolent words. I think I feel very humbled. Actually, we are all are students in some way or the other, right? And learning is an ongoing process, and there is no end to that. We keep on learning every day. Now, with this word, I like to congratulate Government College for Girls, Sector 42, for organizing this lecture, this special lecture, and giving me the opportunity. To start with, I would first like to thank Shri Rupinderji Singh Brar, Director Higher Education, Chandigarh Administration, Madam Principal, Government College for Girls, Sector 42, Professor Nisha Agarwalji, convener of this program, Professor Sudhir Hindwan, Head Department of Political Science of Government College 42, and my very dear young friend Mohit Verma, who teaches there, is an assistant professor in public administration. I know Mohit for a long period of time. Dr. Preeti Sharda, who is also the head librarian of the college. Thank you all very much for giving me this opportunity to interact with you, to talk something about, to remember the principles. And I really must say, the title of the presentation has been so apt. It is basically reiteration of certain values of the principles of the Constitution, which is basically the guideline with which we conduct ourselves in everyday life. So for the purpose of my audience, I would broadly touch upon, like some preliminary remarks on the Constitution of India. And then, since Constitution Day is basically to again reiterate the significance of the Constitution, I'm going to touch upon the significance of the Constitution and touch upon if the time permits, on the Preamble, which is the key part of the Constitution of India. Now, Constitution of India, I think many of my speakers before me has already made certain preliminary remarks when it was formed and when it came into vogue, like quite important viewpoints. I'll just reiterate the points already been made. Now, the Constitution of India, will all agree, is the supreme law of the country, and the document lays down the framework demarcating fundamental political code, structure, procedures, powers, and duties of government institutions, and sets out fundamental rights, directive principles, and duties of citizens. Now, Constitution, therefore, is, we will all agree, is a fundamental law of a country that reflects the fundamental principles on which government of the country is based. It is also known as National Law Day or Samvidhan Divas. Now, the day was announced as the Constitution Day on November 19, 2015 by the Government of India. The announcement came while laying the foundation stone of B.R. Ambedkar's Statue of Equality Memorial in Mumbai. The year 2015 also celebrated the 125th birth anniversary of Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. Now, according to the government notification, Constitution Day was also a tribute, or is also a tribute, to Dr. Ambedkar. The draft of the Constitution, as we all know, as a student of political science and as also a citizen of India, we all know that the draft of the Constitution was prepared by a committee chaired by Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar. And Ambedkar was an iconic lawyer. He was a scholar, he was a leader who had championed the cause of the marginals and the downtrodden. Now, the Constitution Assembly, we had members who actually represented the diversity of the country. Professor Hindwan just mentioned that there were 15 women from all across India, and many of these people, many of the members of the Constituent Assembly had fought valiantly for the freedom of the country. The drafting of the Constitution took 2 years, 11 months, and 17 days in order to accomplish the stupendous task of working out the basic text of the Indian Constitution. And it's important for us to remember that this duration within which the Constitution was framed, it was a time of strife, it was a time of turbulence, it was a time of ferment, not only in India but in the whole world. Many of the developing countries were either struggling to come out of the freedom of the colonial rule, or they were new nations struggling with multiple problems of poverty, of illiteracy, of famine, of nation building, of state building. So this was a period of strife, turbulence, and enough challenges, not merely in countries like us, but many other developing countries. Now, Indian Constitution, you will agree with me, it stood the test of the time, as India has been a successful democracy, unlike many other countries who had become independent in the same time. You have multiple examples. If you look at the developing countries during the period, you will find number of examples from Latin America, Africa, who are struggling with the entire project of nation and state building during the period. In that context, we had a much greater success as a democratic nation. Now, the most important purpose of a constitution is it draws a limit on the power of the government. This is the main significance of the constitution, that it does not enable, let the power corrupt us, So the most important purpose of this document, of this important text, important guideline, that it draws a limit on the power of the government by outlining a framework within which the government must function. Say, for example, irrespective of who is the president of India, the powers and functions of the office of the president remains the same. Now, very quickly, if you look at and if you reiterate, if you look at the constitutional project, the Indian constitutional project, that itself can be described in many ways. Okay, so for its most, say for example, according to Granville Austin, who has been a prominent historian, so according to Granville, this entire project of drafting the Indian Constitution, or the entire Indian constitutional project, was about quote unquote social revolution. For others, it was a political project. an expression of the fact that the Indian people were finally sovereign and dedicating themselves to the universal values of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The project does, in some ways, further all these goals. But the backdrop of those substantive aims contains two meta aims of the Constitution that often generally people do not talk about it, or that often go unremarked, unattended to. Now, when the Constitution was enacted, there was a self-conscious sense that in writing a text, India was finding a way to resolve major substantive debates and disputes over norms and values. The task of constitutionalism was a morality that transcended positions and disagreements on particular specific issues. Obviously, indeed, its strength was that it gave a framework for having a common institutional life despite disagreements. So the point that one is trying to argue that entire project was not to look at too much into specificities, but to transcend those specific, micro level differences and give a broad framework for having a common institutional agreement which would guide the social and political life of Indian citizens. Now, the second aspect of constitutionalism was the ambition that while constitution would serve Indian needs, it would not be bound by any particular tradition. It would rather reflect and be in the service of a global conversation on law and values. Okay, so in the debates over particular doctrines, it is easy to miss the distinctiveness of these two ambitions and the way in which they have involved the practice of constitutionalism in India. In some ways, what we find, more than particular achievements, it is the institutionalization of these practices against the odds that constitutes the greatest achievement and challenge of Indian constitutionalism. Now, with this, some of the background that we are talking about, so basically one is arguing or trying to reiterate or infer that in the entire Indian constitutional project was to transcend particularities and work out a larger framework, a broad framework within which the nation state could be governed, could be managed, could be guided by. Now, if we look at some of the salient, that brings us some of the salient. It is important for us on this very important day, and particularly for students as young citizens who are listening to this lecture, to talk about the salient features of the Indian Constitution. As we all know, and we have been studying it, we have been reflecting about it, that some of the salient features of the Indian Constitution is that it is one of the lengthiest constitution that we have. Okay, so Indian Constitution contains detailed description for organization, function, powers of various organs of the government and its institutions as compared to any other written constitution of the world. It has, as we all know, it has borrowed from different countries like America, Australia, Canada, and which only contains 7 articles, 28, and 128 articles and 107 articles respectively. The Constitution of India with amendment has 460 articles, 26 chapters, and 12 schedules. So these are some of the facts that shows us the kind of arduous task, the kind of effort that has been gone in the making of this constitution. Okay, so what do you find, therefore, that the Constitution has a detailed structural and functional provision for various aspects, which is very significant for a vast country like ours, like given the diversity of the country, given the federal polity, and it borrowed heavily, our Constitution borrowed heavily from the Government of India Act 1935. Another important, significant, salient feature of our Constitution is the parliamentary form of government. And it is also, you find that in principle, India has borrowed parliamentary form of government from United Kingdom. But because the Indian masses were accustomed with the Westminster system, it was preferred by the leaders and the masses to adopt the parliamentary form of government. It is based on the principles of government's accountability to the parliament and its members. As we all know, that president is the legal titular head as appointed by the Constitution. However, what we find that the power vested in the president was carried out through the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So these are some of the basic preliminary facts which I do not know go further into detail. And it is a wonderful mix. It is a blend of rigidity and flexibility. Another important point that which we need to highlight is its rigidity and flexibility. Now, the Constitution of India provides for two types of amendment as mentioned in Article 368 of the Constitution. So Indian Constitution is neither rigid as USA Constitution nor as flexible as the British Constitution. And when we're talking about rigidity, when you're pointing out the rigid aspect of the Constitution, rigidity basically refers to putting a kind of a restraint, kind of bar on the unilateral action that the Union can take. Now, the Union can make only laws on state subject only if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution under Article 249 with the two-thirds sitting and voting majority. Now, today what we find that, like Professor Hindwan did mention that, when it comes to the functioning of Indian Constitution, there has been many challenges. It is bound to have challenges in a diverse country like us. Today, if you look at the rigidity and flexibility and looking at the federal polity, there have been many debates that is going on with many other issues which the country is facing, whether it's the question of farmer laws and whether it's the question of Article 370. There are many issues that brings us into debates on center-state relation, which obviously is not now the subject of my discussion here. Another significant feature of the Indian Constitution, as Dr. Mohit Verma had pointed out in the initial, when he was introducing the topic, was the fundamental rights and directive principles. Now, fundamental rights are called fundamental for the development of an individual in moral, spiritual, intellectual sphere. It is essential for the development of the individual. Now, induction of fundamental rights, you'll agree with me, is considered significant. It is considered to be a significant indicator of democratic nature of any constitution. And fundamental rights, therefore, are prohibition against the state. It is basically signifies curtailment of power against the state. So the state does not become arbitrary by giving certain fundamental rights to the citizen. In fact, it is a negative obligation for the state and positive for the people. In fact, if one look later on, we'll talk about that how the people is at the center stage of the Indian Constitution, the centrality of people, and which is reflected in two of its features, that is universal adult franchise and fundamental rights. That is the essence of, that is the soul of Indian Constitution. Now, goes without saying that independent judiciary is another hallmark of the Indian Constitution. Supreme Court under Article 32 and High Court under Article 226 are empowered to issue writs to safeguard rights of citizens, covering fundamental rights. And the judiciary is also the guardian of citizen rights. In fact, very existence of rights depends on the remedy of its enforcement. Indian judiciary, that is the reason that we find, and again, there is a lot of debate now that is going on in this context too. These are some of the challenges, given the diversity, given the magnanimity, given the changing contours of the country, that whether Indian judiciary is, to what extent it is independent. So, but in a normative sense, given the provisions of the Indian Constitution, Indian judiciary is independent. It is free of political pressure, and it also is the tool of judicial review to maintain its impartial nature. So that is the core essence that we have an independent judiciary to protect the fundamental rights of the citizens. It enables enforcement of these rights rather. That brings us to another important significant feature, that is the directive principles of state policy, and which is enshrined in the Part 4 of the Indian Constitution that many of us know already, and which actually the directive principles are extremely important because it set goals for becoming a welfare state. However, we need to keep in mind that it can be only be implemented by the political will of the government. Now, unlike fundamental rights, directive principles are non-justiciable in nature, and this is mentioned in Article 37 of the Indian Constitution. And because the state is not liable, or you cannot force the state to, is not liable to implement the directives, therefore no legal action can be taken against the state in the court of law due to their non-justiciable nature. Now, as far as fundamental duties are concerned, it is recommended by the Swaran Singh Committee, and 10 fundamental duties were introduced by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, 1976. It was introduced by the 42nd Amendment Act. Now, fundamental duties were added as a moral reminder to every citizen that with rights follows their certain set of duties. No, you cannot have rights without duties, and there is entire debate on rights and duties, and also and borrowed from liberal political theory. Now, fundamental duties requires the citizens to maintain the democratic spirit of the country by abiding the duties. So what we see that rights and duties are something that that goes hand in hand, right? So, and if you look at the Indian Constitution, that another significant feature that we can infer, and we have talked about also, is the federation with a strong unitary tendency. And despite being a federal constitution, what you find that the Indian Constitution acquires unitary tendency and character in specific situations. Say for example, during national emergency, during any kind of crisis that you find, that you'll have this unitary tendency coming up overarchingly. Now, so therefore, what you find that the Indian Constitution is quasi-federal in nature, and this was termed, as Ivor Jennings had pointed out rightly, and Article 352, Article 356, Article 360 can be declared for national, state, and financial emergency respectively. As far as the notion of, or the idea of secularism is concerned, and which Indian nation is basically, the hallmark of Indian nation is this secular character. So Constitution provides that space, gives you that provision. So India has no official that way national or state religion. Okay, so and this is reflected from the fact that there is no defining national or state religion, and the relationship between the state and the individual is devoid by shadow of religion. As we know that a secular state does not give any recognition to any religious order of its own, and in fact, the preamble declares to resolve and secure to all its citizens liberty of faith, belief, and worship. Right. So this secular character of the Indian Constitution is something that in today, as in a constitutional day, as we are celebrating this constitutional day, is something worth living by, or to adhering, and to respect that secular character of the Indian Constitution and practice it in everyday life. Another very significant feature of the Indian Constitution is its single citizenship. Indian Constitution has federal arrangement that we know between the center and the state that we talked about, but unlike USA, India has single citizenship. Okay. Now, single citizenship means that citizen of India is that citizenship of India as a state, and there will be no separate citizenship with provinces or other countries. Now, we all know that all citizens of India enjoys we all have common citizenship in India. We do not have separate citizenship for different states and union territories. So basically, it is to consolidate the spirit of Indianhood and oneness that we have this single citizenship in India. In terms of principle, in terms of its values, the idea is to have this oneness, the character of oneness. as I told you before, just that there are two features of the Indian Constitution which basically reiterates and highlights the centrality of people centrality in the Indian Constitution. One is fundamental rights, and the other one is universal adult franchise. Now, universal adult franchise, as we know, is a right to vote and elect a person in election, that is called franchise. Adult franchise means that the person who is above the age of 18 can vote and elect a person in election without any discrimination based on caste, class, religion, and, region, etc. So what you find that when this universal adult franchise was introduced, with the introduction of this universal adult franchise, the earlier practice or the older practice which existed of communal electorate, which existed during the British colonial rule, was abolished. Okay. Now, Article 326 of the Indian Constitution provides universal adult franchise to the Indian citizen, and every person above the 18 years of age has the right to elect their representatives for the legislature. So therefore, what we find that there are many other significant features that which we find infer from the Indian Constitution. So generally, when we talk about constitution, we also and constitutionalism, right? These are two distinctive words. Now, it's important to know also the distinction between what is constitution and constitutionalism. There is a fine, distinctive line between the two. Constitutionalism is a political philosophy, okay, which is based on the idea that government authority is derived from the people and should be limited by a constitution that clearly expresses what the government can and cannot do. It is therefore the idea that the state is not free to do anything it wants, but is bounded by laws and is limited by authority. Okay. In fact, what you find in India, in the Indian context, constitutionalism can be traced in the text of the preamble of the Constitution of India, which starts with "We the people of India," which represents the authority behind the Constitution. Okay, the authority represents what we want India to be. That is not the government authority, but we, the people of India. Further, what you find that there is no watertight separation of power like the USA Constitution. In India, there is a division of power. There is a power of review. Okay, the Supreme Court has the power to review any law made by the Parliament, and it has all the authority to declare that law unconstitutional. Okay, now there are many instances where Supreme Court has declared by the Parliament to be unconstitutional. Okay, so there are a number of examples. During I recollect that the Supreme Court, when it was the 99th Amendment, he did declare 99th Constitutional Amendment unconstitutional, and it restored the collegium system of appointment of judges in higher judiciary. In case of Golaknath, DC Wadhwa, Dalbir Singh, Puttaswamy's case also, and many other cases, has interpreted the power of the government to legislate. So while when you were talking about, this is what so basically this is what the difference. So there's a difference between constitution and constitutionalism. Okay. Now the constitution is a legally defined what is a constitution? Constitution is a legally defined set of rules and norms which aims to structure and which aims to delineate, specify the limits of government power and authority. Okay, so in a written constitution, these principles are written down and they are legally documented. And whereas in an unwritten constitution, rules and norms are based on customary practices, conventions, and statute. Example is that of UK, right? So what you find, so generally what you find that there is a difference between constitution and constitutionalism. Now, any legal documentation, another thing that we need to keep in mind, that any legal documentation and codification does not necessarily have the status of a constitution. Companies and corporations are guided by laws, treaties, which define how organizations may be constituted, how they function, how they regulate themselves. In the case of nation states, constitution has the supreme status as compared to any other legal document. It contains provisions, it contains principles, it contains procedures in accordance to which laws are made. So codified constitution or written constitution also act as limiters of state power. So in other words, it defines the legal boundaries which the state cannot transgress. Right? So what you find that this it's important for us to know the difference between constitution and constitutionalism. Uh, um, you also have a very another important distinctive feature, that is separation of powers. Now, separation of powers in India is reflected more in the separation of functions. Okay, so hence in India it is not abided in rigidity that you find. So USA follows a more strict separation of power as compared to India. The courts have the power to declare, this we know, that the courts have the power to declare any law null and void, okay, if it goes against the spirit of the constitution. So the constitution makers have clearly defined various functions of each organ. So the legislature and the executive have all the powers, including the power to finance and act as a representative of the people's will. Now the distinction between the functions of the head of the government and the head of the state are clearly enlisted in the constitution. Say, for example, accordingly, the president is the executive, the parliament, that is the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha together, is the legislature, and the Supreme Court, High Court, and the lower court together constitute an integrated judiciary. At the state level, similarly, we have the Vidhan Sabha is the legislature with governor as the executive, and as we all know that the power and the functions of these institutions and the functionaries are well listed within the constitutional framework. Right. So if somebody can tell me how much time that I have, that we can go in for a little bit on the preamble of the Indian Constitution. So I continue because I've not heard. So very quickly, because I can see even questions coming in between. So again, I start with that every constitution therefore has a philosophy, right? And preamble that way means the introductory, which is the introductory part of the constitution, embodies the philosophical as well as intent behind the constitution. Okay. The framers of the Indian Constitution wanted to clearly state the aims and objectives of the Constitution. Therefore, taking cue from the American Constitution, they also included a preamble, even though it does not have legal sanction. Now, as far I'm not going into the contents of the Constitution. So because this is very writ large, because preamble also has certain significant words. You know, the key words of the Indian in preamble is very, very important for us, and the significance of the Constitution lies in the fact that, as Ernest Baker, actually an eminent political scientist, described the preamble as the keynote to the Constitution. Even you have people like Nani Palkiwala. Okay, he described preamble as the identity card of the Constitution. The two purposes that preamble therefore serves to the Constitution are that it states the source from which Constitution gets its authority. It also mentions the philosophical objectives which the Constitution seeks to establish and promote. Okay, so I think these are some of the, and very quickly, the key word that is there in the preamble is that that India is a sovereign independent country. It is independent and not under authority of any other country. That's important words are therefore sovereign, socialist. Okay, so it has been the word socialist, as we all know, added that it is the 42nd Amendment Act 1976, which added the term socialist. And we also know that uh, um, that directive principles of state policy are socialist in nature. So India has endorsed uh, a democratic socialist model. Democratic socialism holds faith in mixed economy. Okay, so there's what you find, therefore, the a blend of Marxism and Gandhian socialism has a, I mean, so therefore it is a blend of Marxian and Marxism and Gandhian socialism with the dominance of Gandhian principle. Okay. Now the term secular was also added by the 42nd Amendment Act 1976. The Western model of secularism implies complete separation between the state and religion, and Indian secularism has a positive connotation, giving equal status, aid, assistance to all religion by the state. And right to freedom of religion, that is Article 25th and 28 guarantees their fundamental status to the citizens. Another important keyword that is in the preamble is the democratic character. Okay, the India has opted for representative democracy, where people elect their responsible representative. India also opted for parliamentary system of government, and democracy embodies not only political values but social economic democracy. Right to vote, periodic elections, rule of law, independence of judiciary are some of the characteristics of Indian judiciary or Indian democracy. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Lastly, what I say that republic, the Indian republic, as we all know, refers to a state which supreme power is held by the people and their elected representatives, and which has an elected president rather than a monarch. So basically, Indian president is a symbol of Indian republic. So Republic of India has therefore the elected head of the state, that is the president. With independence, India became free to elect its head of the state. It has a representative democracy, which makes it a democratic republic, and India's membership of the Commonwealth is an independent country. So these are the important, important aspects of Indian Constitution. We also have the concept of justice, which we cannot ignore. Now, justice means the fulfillment of legitimate expectations of the individual under laws and to assure full benefit promised to him therein. So we had just talked about that Indian Constitution, therefore what it envisaged an integrated justice consisting of political, social, and when we say integrated justice, it consists political, economic, and social justice. Social and economic justice together, we use the term distributive justice. And when you talk in terms of political justice, it basically means equal access to political office and equality of political rights. And when we are talking about social justice, basically it denotes equal treatment to citizens and no discrimination on the basis of caste, color, race, religion, and sex. Okay, so what you find that as far as economic justice is concerned, primarily it implies that there should be elimination of inequalities on the basis of wealth, income and property. So apart from justice, we have two other quickly on liberty and equality. And liberty is the freedom to live as you choose without too many restrictions from government or authority. It is not obviously absolute, but it is qualified. When you say have the liberty, but it should not harm others, your liberty should not harm others' liberty too. So it also acts as a restraint as well as provide opportunities for the development of individual personality. So what you find that fundamental right has given to all its citizens in liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship as enshrined in the preamble. And Equality, when we talk in terms of equality, equality refers to equal treatment under law irrespective of social status. And fraternity refers to the sense of brotherhood among people as continuous and evolving process, right? So these are some of the important feature, and I'm not going into the debate. I think most of us actually know that there has been an immense debate in the Indian Constitution regarding the basic structure, whether it is a part of the Indian Constitution, whether it is a part of the Constitution or not, right? So there's entire debate. And I can see that that there has been enough has been written, and there are also important uh, like debates on regarding the basic structure part of the Indian Constitution. And we find that the Constitution, when you talk about the basic structure doctrine, what does it primarily say? It basically it empowers the Constitution. The Constitution empowers the Parliament and the state legislatures to make laws within their respective jurisdiction. And it also has bills, to amend the Constitution can only be bills which can amend the Constitution can only be introduced in the Parliament, but this power is also not absolute. If the Supreme Court finds any law made by the Parliament inconsistent with the Constitution, it has the power to declare the law to be invalid. Thus, what you find, to preserve the ideals and philosophy of the original Constitution, the Supreme Court has laid down the basic structure doctrine. Now, according to the doctrine, the Parliament cannot destroy or touch upon or alter the basic structure of the doctrine. And it is very interesting that the word basic structure actually is not mentioned in the Constitution. Okay, so this brings us to kind of sum up our discussion today, and try and see and basically reflect upon that. I can see also there are many questions coming in regarding the challenges which Indian Constitution has faced. So basically, before I end my lecture, because many questions, we do talk about that we have an adopted Constitution. That is one thing is very clear. So and we the question also arises that why did we have an adopted Constitution, right? So the question is that our familiarity with the being a part of the colonial rule, we were the Constitution makers, the leaders were relatively already familiar with the Western model of constitutional and constitutionalism. And there are many of the challenges, means contemporary challenges we can talk about. There are, because given the complexity of the country, given the diversity of the country, given the kind of the dynamics that you are in, there we have the challenges of a huge country with a federal polity. We have a huge country with the poverty, illiteracy. These are the challenges that comes in. When it comes in terms of implementing into day-to-day life of the Constitution or constitutional provisions, challenges are bound to be there. And but nonetheless, this today, the Constitutional Day, I again this is important for us. The challenges are a part of any democratic nation, because there will be diversity of opinion there, given the diversity of context, the kind of diversity in terms of different religion, and the challenges will be there. But we have to address the challenges without compromising on the basic essence and the values laid down in the Indian Constitution. With this, I congratulate all of us, including myself and my friends here, that we need to, as Indian citizens, we need to keep intact the essence and values of the Indian Constitution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Pampa, for such an enlightening session. And you'll be surprised that we have so many questions pouring in, and
Yes.
from the wide array, and ranging from all the problems the Constitution is facing right now at the policy level, and also some of the static questions that are always there among the students. And a lot of students are asking questions on the issue, the very relevant issue today on the farmers bill. But beside that, I would like to ask you few questions with your permission. uh, the, First of all, that the question that was really being asked by so many participants, that what, as per your view, what is the biggest challenge with regard to Indian Constitution today?
Okay. Uh,
Yes.
there is, if you biggest, it's very difficult, very subjective. Some of the major challenges, I think, that in the last, say, 70 plus years that we are faced, means, Indian Constitution major is facing, is number one, starts also with the different interpretation of the Constitution by the judiciary and the government. Okay. This So what you have, there's this kind of diverse interpretation also lead to a prolonged judicial review, petitions, amendments by the government. Okay. There has been a lot of disagreement also between the judiciary and the legislature. um, Second challenge means, like, I can count two or three, I can immediately comes to my mind, the balance between the fundamental rights and the directive principle. There has always been a debate as which of the two is subordinate the other. Defining the status of, say, for example, right to property has been a major challenge in this aspect, and finally, right to property was removed from fundamental rights and given a status of a legal right. Right. um, Another challenge that comes in terms of in the practice of constitution and constitutionalism is the relation between the center and the states. Like, and here perhaps the farmer laws I do not want to get into, because that will take us into a different arena of debate altogether and demands a different kind of a kind of a treatment. So, but very quickly, there's most of this today we are talking in terms of cooperative federalism today. This like, this is the challenges of cooperative federalism, because the relation, because some of these issues, I mean, the many of the questions that I've seen is also a question of center state relations. So relations between center and the state. And this is nothing very new. The center state relations, it goes back, if you go back to the history, you'll find that so many even committees have been formed, like, to address the center state relations, whether it's a Rajamandar committee, Anandpur Sahib resolution, West Bengal memorandum, and now today we are talking in terms of farmer bills. So what has happened on a more positive note, that with the increased participation of states in policy making through Niti Ayog, obviously the challenge is to satisfy the states. Okay, so the center state relation comes also in terms of some of the challenges with the Indian constitution or constitutionalism has been facing. I don't know. Means one can go on in terms of noting down the challenges that we are facing. There are many more.
There is, can I?
Yes, please.
Sound is coming. Can you
Yes,
hear me?
yes,
Yes, sir.
yes, I can.
Yeah, Professor Papa, you have enumerated entire thing in a beautiful manner, and I've yet to see anybody explaining in such a pertinent manner with regard to various challenges of the Indian Constitution is facing at the moment. But the major question which is bothering me for a pretty long time, and I think which has the basic crux of the problem, and which is enumerated in human nature to a great extent, because I am yet to find the answer of these pertinent question, and that has been that why have been people searching for religious and cultural safeguard against the stark realities of hunger, deprivation, poverty? Who are the people creating these fear cycles among the masses, and why has been this obnoxious nexus between police and political patronage at the local level is still going on. I think unless or until we ask these questions to ourselves and try solving these problems, which basically lies into human nature, and it takes you back to the Hobbesian nature of nasty, brutal, solitary, short, and selfish, where the human nature itself is known by two basic instincts, either fear or you have agreed. So unless or until I think we capture in that, we will time and again find this these kind of challenges coming back from the chink of retrospect right before us. So I think it's very important to address those questions as well as the basic instinct which is there in each human. And behind these activities, sometimes you find lies the political economic interest of the powerful syndicates which have been capable of sponsoring these programs, and therefore you see that kind of an nationalism which is coming up, the terrorism which we are encountering, and the kind of insurgency which is going on,
Absolutely.
all around, and then using misinterpretation of religion in such a manner so that it creates a threat to the Constitution of India. Whereas Dr. Ambedkar himself said in the closing remark on 25th of November only, he said, "You see, it doesn't matter whether the Constitution is very good or bad, but it's the people who are working in that Constitution. That very good Constitution can be made bad by the people and their intentions, and very bad Constitution can be also made very good by the people who are working in. So what we require at the moment is people of very, very strong character. I hope
Absolutely.
this is the kind of a thing.
Absolutely.
I think this is a high time we all realize what are we doing for our country rather than what is country doing for us. I think it's a moral
Absolutely.
obligation on our part as well. So it's a wonderful explanation by you. I owe a deep debt of gratitude to you for your explanations.
Uh,
Thank you.
Sir, I would like to have another question with a very small comment by ma'am. And there's so many questions, ranging from like I just told you about the farmer bill, and then the equality, ranging from the economical rights, and then the reservation that we discuss usually in our classes as well. But there's a beautiful question, which goes like this: that are good intentions important than the written laws? It's a different question, so I think we must have views from the ma'am side. Are good intentions important than the written laws?
um, um, uh, my quick take on this, that laws are very, very important to provide us with a framework within which we operate, within which we function. But there is something called, as we call good intention, there is something called precedents, good precedences, okay? Good tradition, practices, the precedents, you'll find in that, in not only in the context of nation states, or in terms of, within the framework of the functioning of the country, even in institutions, we all work within the institutional framework. So we'll find that it's not only the rule, laws, and regulations that are important in the functioning of any institution, but good practices which acts as a precedence, that becomes important in institutional functionings. So good norms as institutions, as Douglas North and others talks about, they're equally important in functioning of any institution, whether it is the question of at the level of the state, or whether it is the level of an organization. Thank you.
True that, ma'am. And ma'am, after this wonderful interactive session today, I can only say that our participants, the students, and the future of this nation, would have many takeaways and learning, and they shall make every endeavor to follow and implement these principles whenever and wherever they get an opportunity. And ma'am, on this positive note, now I'll request Dr. Preeti Sharda, librarian, PGCG 40, to kindly present the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Shri Rupinderjit Singh Barar, our most valued invited guests, faculty members, and students. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. First of all, I would like to thank our principal, Professor Nisha Garwal, for this inaugural address. Her positivity and insight has given a new height to this webinar. My special thanks to Speaker of the Day, Professor Pampa Mukherjee, Department of Pol Science, Punjab University, Chandigarh, for making us familiar with our Constitution. I extend my most sincere thanks to you, madam. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohit Verma, for facilitating the question answer session. It was indeed the bombardment of the questions, and Mohit took it very intelligently. He took only the questions which are uh, which are need of the hour. Thank you, all the members of organizing team. I take this opportunity to thank uh, faculty members of various colleges of Chandigarh for gracing this occasion. We are extremely grateful to you all to be the part of this webinar. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. It requires meticulous planning and execution and eye on every detail. I would like to thank all the members of the organizing team for making it happen. My special thanks to Professor Poonam Agarwal, Professor Sudhir Handwan, and Mohit Verma for perfect coordination. I am happy to share that about 500 participants attended the webinar. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed every bit of this webinar. On behalf of the PGC 42, I extend my gratitude to you all. Last but not the least, a big thank you to each one of you who has contributed in one way or the other way to make this webinar a success. Thank you, one and all. Dear participants, the feedback form has been shared in the chat box. Please fill the feedback form so that you get the certificate. Thank you so much. Thank you, Pampa ma'am. Thank you, Sri
Thank
sir, and
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.